Today on Strawberry Ink, we revisit one of the most chillin' cold cases in St. Louis history. The tragic murder of 9-year-old Angie Housman. Before I continue on with the episode, I want to warn you that listener discretion is advised. Sensitive topics are covered, and those topics are not suitable for everybody. Angie disappeared on the afternoon of November 18th, 1993, just before Thanksgiving, after getting off her school bus in St. Anne, Missouri. Normally, a woman would watch the kids as they got home safely, but on that day she was not there. Angie's parents lived with her at a duplex that was only a half a block away from that bus stop. Yet, she never made it home. The St. Anne Police Department was notified about this at 7:10 p.m., as the parents could not find her. So, they reported the disappearance to the school, and the school confirmed she was not in their building, so the school called the cops. A large-scale search unfolded. Efforts to find her began immediately. After 4 days with no leads, with her being gone, the major case squad of Greater St. Louis was called in to help. Hundreds of volunteers joined in the search as well. Her body was finally discovered on November 27th, 1993, by a hunter in the Busch Wildlife Area in St. Charles County. She had been tied to a tree, gagged with her own underwear, and her eyes, mouth were taped with duct tape. She was partially nude and covered in snow. Forensic examination revealed signs of prolonged sexual abuse, physical abuse, dehydration, and starvation. Ultimately, the cause of death was hypothermia, a result of exposure to the cold for several hours. That is according to the St. Louis Medical Examiner's Office. I am back after taking a brief break. And in this episode, I will be continuing the story of Angie Housman. So far, we covered that she vanished one day after school, that she was often picked on by classmates, so there is a possibility that she may have wanted to run away from home. However, everything happened so unexpectedly and so strangely. And maybe she could have been found in time if there were proper systems set up. As those systems, the Amber Alert or any of the other systems, they are so influenced by government policy that most likely in most cases they may not work out for most disappearances because not every kid who goes missing gets into that system. Many are just searched for by law enforcement, and many do not show up in the phone notifications. In the following month, around the time frame where Angie vanished, there was another disappearance of a 10-year-old girl named Cassidy Center. This heightened community fear. I will be covering Cassidy later this month. Schools instituted buddy systems to ensure that their students would not walk alone on their way back home. Despite thousands of tips and investigative leads, the Houseman case went unsolved for more than 25 years. Breakthrough came in 2019 when advancements in forensic science allowed investigators to extract a DNA profile from Angie's clothing, which was preserved since 1993. That profile matched Earl Webster Cox, whom was not previously suspected of having abducted her. Cox had a long criminal history. In the 1970s, while serving in the U.S. Air Force, he was court-martialed for sexual abuse in 1982 and dishonorably discharged. From the 1980s to the 90s, he served multiple prison terms for sexual abuse and other related offenses. Then in 2003, the FBI arrested him for having been involved in a porn spree. He was caught with images of several nude kids. There were not just one or two images, they were thousands. For that, he ended up being sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. By the time he was linked to the Angie Housman disappearance, Cox had already served multiple prison sentences and was, at the time, incarcerated. He was considered too dangerous to be released. When tied to this crime, he was serving his porn sentence at the Butner Correctional Complex in North Carolina. In June 2019, the St. Charles County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, led by Tim Lomar, presented the DNA findings from a state probe to a grand jury. This grand jury of the St. Charles County Circuit Court returned an indictment. It included first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sodomy. Omar immediately unsealed this indictment and charged Cox with those offenses. At this point, the U.S. Marshals picked Cox up at the Butner and transported him to Missouri. He was driven and dropped off at the St. Charles County Jail. War reporter Holly McKay described Angie's life before her death and how she was picked on. McKay covered in a paragraph. They called her Stinky. 9-year-old Angie Housman wore the same threadbare clothes day after day. She didn't bathe regularly. Her classmates' cruel nickname followed her through the schoolyard. She wandered her St. Anne neighborhood asking for food. Some neighbors helped, others turned her away. She really had no chance in life. In November 2019, Errol Cox did not plead to either the murder case nor another unrelated sexual assault case he was also tied to and facing. He got a public defense and not guilty pleas were entered on his behalf. This public defender of his, Michael Sato, submitted the pleas directly at the St. Charles County Circuit Court to Judge John Cunningham. That was for the murder case, and for the unrelated sexual assault case to Judge Jason Dotson of the St. Louis County Circuit Court. Cox was absent due to medical issues. He had suffered 2 strokes and was using a wheelchair, having lost his ability to walk. In August 2020, Cox, under a negotiated plea deal, pleaded guilty to the murder charges in order to avoid the death penalty. Judge Daniel Pelican sentenced him to life in prison without parole, with the 2 other counts being merged into a sentence. In March 2021, Cox reached another plea deal for the unrelated sexual assault case. This one was specifically negotiated with prosecutor Wesley Bell in order to take him out of the county jail and into the state prison system. Cox, in this case, entered an Alford plea in March 2021 before Judge Dotson. This judge immediately imposed a sentence of 10 years in prison, to be served concurrently to his life sentence. With the deals, he waived his right to appeal both cases. There was already a cell set up for him where he could be cared for through his health issues at the Southeast Correctional Center in Charleston, Missouri. That is where he died in 2024 at the age of 67 of natural causes. This case remains a stark reminder of both the horrors of the exploitation of young individuals and the role that persistent investigation, forensic science, play in bringing justice even decades later. Angie's life was tragically cut short, but thanks to advancements in DNA technology, the predator was finally held accountable. Thank you for listening to this episode. Take care and have a good rest of your day. Be kind to one another.